requests. Can you give us an example of a program you'd like to highlight?
Sure. I'm going to feed off of something that Akiba and Scott just hit it on. And that is, you cannot separate zero trust based on where someone sits in an organization. So yes, there's a heavy technical bent to zero trust, but there's a significant business or operation side of it too as well. And one of the challenges we discovered in trying to deploy and help customers build a zero trust deployment, not just an architecture, but an actual deployment, is this notion of silos. And that is, for years, people have had command and control of who access what in their environments, in their domains. So for instance, the servers, quote unquote, or the workstations or the applications that were driving their particular agency mission, or that particular chief, for instance, they controlled that kingdom, for instance. And so once again, they had a moat, so to speak, around their infrastructure, around their data. Zero trust means that I now have to collaborate across not just my agency, but interagency and across the government, for instance. And in the private sector, it's even worse. So you think of what we take for granted when we order something in our Amazon cart, just how many services have to be authorized across them to even access, for instance, my credit card and simple things like that. You take that to an agency. Well, how do you now remove those silos or those command and control centers of control from a particular chief? And that means that there's going to be some wrangling or negotiating, or I would say brinksmanship, negotiating some time to get that control away. And the projects we've been involved with, both at Air Force, Marine Corps, we just got awarded at State Department, was to first understand who's actually controlling those domains. So if you have an LDAP directory like Active Directory or other services, for instance, well, how do you now wrestle control of that away from someone? The key is to help them understand it's not about control. It's about serviceability. How are you delivering your service? How are you meeting your mission objectives, for instance? And I think too much of the security bend has been around who grants access. Where is that access granted? And that makes for a very significant hurdle when it comes to overcoming those silos. So the first step I've seen is consolidation of those directories, consolidation of those silos, so basically from a disparate model to a more centralized model. And then that gives you the ability to now take a step back and actually look at your kingdom, so to speak. We can come back to this kingdom and moat thing, but I'm sorry. To step back and look at it from the standpoint, okay, now who really should be doing what, for instance? If you just have a simple application that just works on one specific thing, for instance, really, do you need domain access privileges across the entire organization? And every time we've seen a breach that, Jeff hinted at it, cyber breaches, when they happen, it happens because there is access granted to someone who shouldn't be in your organization. And if they can move laterally, and the best way to move laterally is to get access to some admin or super user provisions or credentials. So for us, we try to figure out exactly who's got the keys on the Windows side, the Linux side, for instance, and then other operating environments, and then consolidate those things to the point where a CISO can now step back and say, now, based on who you are and what you do, I can now determine exactly what level of zero trust or least privilege you should actually have. And then I can also determine things like impossible travel from that information, because we used to never know where people actually were. So when we do all these things in concert and consolidate these efforts, you get across the issue of execution. And once we can help our agency partners develop a better execution model, zero trust becomes something that everyone can live with. Everyone can point to and says, yeah, it's actually working for me, versus it being a struggle for control within the organization.